Oh, we're going live right now. There's no intro. Ha! Okay. Hi, everybody. Happy Sunday evening. Just me tonight, Steve Schirmer. Absolutely glistening as I look at myself in the camera right now. It is hot up in Rochester, New York. It's hot in Western New York. I actually was in the sun all day. Every year I go to the NASCAR race at Watkins Glen. And I was there all day today. It was 9 million degrees in aluminum bleachers. Not the most interesting race. I think I left some comments in the Discord about some of my thoughts about what they've done to turn 11 or turn 1 at Watkins Glen. Very similar takes, like, as far as like track setup and like how I feel about like with golf course setup. They definitely dumbed down a couple turns at Watkins Glen. It's not as good as what it used to be, but yeah, I am pretty baked coming into this show. The good news, though, is that we're going to talk about the BMW Championship. We're going to talk about Case Valley tonight. Not that complicated of a handicap, in my opinion. Andy had done his show earlier today, and I'm going to guess I'm probably going to repeat a lot of what he said. So there were some changes, though, to the golf course since you saw it in 2021. So I am going to go over some of those. They kind of downplayed, I think, a little bit what they did. They did a little more changes the course that I thought they were going to do. So we'll go over some of those changes, and if those maybe want to change how you want to look at this tournament, or do you want to just run back what we saw back in 2021? We'll see about that. I did end up, though, leave the race early enough. Well, not leave the race early enough. The race ended very quickly. Let's put it that way. The Xfinity race the previous day went to like 7 o'clock. There was a red flag. There was wrecks. Great race. This one, though, because the cars handled so good and there was maybe only one caution the entire time, ended very quickly. I ended up getting out of the track, I think, by 4:30. The race started at 2. So that was actually plenty of time for me to drive back from the track to Rochester and enjoy the back 9 of the FedEx St. Jude. And that was a tremendous back 9. I know we dump on Southwind a lot because of the architecture. Look, I think I like it a little better than most people. It at least rewards good ball striking. There is a penalty for missed fairways. There's plenty of penalty areas for loose shots. And we saw when guys were missing fairways or missing greens, and I think it definitely helped that the greens were very firm coming into this golf course being brand new, even though it got an inch of rain overnight on Friday. It still played pretty firm through the weekend. So I think that definitely helped. But, there's worse courses, and usually does deliver a pretty exciting finish. We've seen a lot of playoffs happen at the St. Jude over the last couple of years, and this week is no exception. I think the biggest takeaway, though, congratulations, Justin Rose. You have secured your Ryder Cup spot for Team Europe. Going to be interesting to see what they do for that 12th spot. 11 guys, I think, are basically locked up at this point, and then we'll see who's number 12. Will they just run back the entire team and just bring back Nikolai Højgaard? Will they add someone new? We'll see. U.S. spot, though, we're starting, I think, to see a little bit in the focus who's really going to be on the team. Obviously, J.J. Spaun was going to be on the team. I loved him this week. I was really, really regretting not betting him outright as I saw him make a charge in the back 9. Thankfully, he didn't win because I probably wouldn't be doing this show tonight. Again, based on how the summer has gone with my outright bets, if he ended up winning, I just had a measly little top 20. But good call on him. Sorry for anybody who had him outright. That was a pretty brutal beat, especially when it looked like Justin Rose was going to hit it in the water on the first playoff hole. I would have lost my fucking mind if I was on him for an outright there. More sad, though, Tommy Fleetwood, once again, coming up short. Same situation, too. Up 2 in the back 9 with, I think, 4 to play. It looked like he was going to really hold it together. He made some birdies in a row and then just made an absolute mess in the par 5, which basically was a bogey. He parred that hole. And you just can't do that with, some hard-charging opponents. And too many mistakes down the back 9 or over the last couple holes. I mean, I did admire him get up there and actually taking the interview with a Golf Channel there, with NBC. I know you could definitely tell he didn't want to talk. He was trying to collect his thoughts at that point, but he faced the music. unlike some other golfers who can definitely dodge the microphone when bad things happen. So another close call for Tommy. Maybe run him back. I think a lot of things that we saw at Southwind today, we can probably look again to Eastlake in a couple weeks. So maybe keep some of these guys in mind who did pretty well this week. We're definitely coming to a different golf course, though, this week with Cays Valley. Rewards, different strategies. I don't think this show is going to be very long tonight, but we'll get through it. So why don't we start with Cays Valley here? So I did want to include this photo. This is Cays Valley. This is, I think, the 8th hole here. You know, and I always like picking out the cover photo for the PowerPoint that I use for the preview shows. And I saw this one, and I love fall golf. I mean, anyone, I think it was in the Northeast, loves fall golf. You get the foliage that turns, you know, like I personally love playing when temperatures are in like high 50s, low 60s. You know, you get the nice late afternoon sun hitting the fescue here. You got some purple grasses right in front of it here. You got the leaves turning, you know, and this is definitely going to be a golf course that probably is going to have an unfavorable view on ISN and probably across, you know, anybody who studies, you know, golf architecture. It's just a reminder that, you know what, it's on a good piece of land. Be very pretty to play on sometimes. There's a lot of natural land movement that is at this place. You know, it definitely doesn't feel like, you know, you're playing through the woods, you know, for the most part. So it at least has that going for it. It's in great condition for the members too. I think there's 600 members in total at Cays Valley. This golf course is a Tom Fazio. It was built in 2001. And this is the last time they played this in 2021. This was, again, around COVID, and there was a lot of tournaments that got canceled. And one of the things that I thought was funny was because we only had seen 2 golf courses of Fazios, usually on the PGA Tour. One is Corrales, and the other is Quail Hollow. And those are the only 2 really on the regular schedule. And with all these cancellations of tournaments and the reshuffling of schedules for about 2 years during the pandemic there, Fazio kind of used that, or whoever was in charge of these golf courses. I don't think it was a coincidence that a lot of Fazio courses started to pop up on the PGA Tour schedule. You had Congaree, you had Shadow Creek, you had Summit Club. Basically, the CJ Cup became the Fazio Cup for a little bit. You also had Kasuma Gaseki, which was the site of the Olympics. He redid that golf course there too. And then, so this was number 7 Fazio course that we had seen in about 2 years by the time this golf course rolled around. So this is what we're going to do for this. We're going to recap 2021 because it's the only bullet point that we have for this place. And I'll show you how the leaderboard shook out. I'll show you what mattered there, what did matter, I think more importantly. And then we'll get to some of the changes to the golf course that we had leading up to this tournament. And then we'll just figure out, is it really going to change your handicap at all? So let's get to the GCSA report. This is from 2021 because the 2025 one is not out yet. I don't know if they were at the race with me today, just drinking a bunch of Bat Blues under the hot sun. So maybe my boy Mike will put out his GCSA fact sheet tomorrow and we can go over it. But just the general specs of this tournament back in 2021. It was a par 72 back then, 7,542 yards, average green side about 5,200 square feet, about, you know, a little smaller than average for the PGA Tour at that point. Bentgrass greens, rough, tall fescue, ryegrass, bluegrass mix, about 3 inches. And then I think we'll come into play a little bit when we talk about the missed fairway penalty for this place. Now, there was part of the changes that they made to this golf course. Apparently, they replaced all the grass with a new type of grass. I have not been able to gather what grass exactly that is. I would imagine it's bent grass still. Maybe they changed the type of bent grass that is on the greens because they also redid all the greens. Now, some greens are completely new where they shifted them. Other, they just resurfaced them because they put, I forget, precision air. It's a type of sub-air system under each green. So they had to rebuild each green back in 2023. Is when they did the renovation. The difference, I think, between what we saw this week or last week at St. Jude with all new greens, redesign, which Come to find out, they basically flattened the greens at St. Jude. That was kind of disappointing. If they're going to redo all the greens to flatten them. But those had no traffic and no play on them. So those had quite a nice little hop to them once you hit the green there. If you were hitting out of the rough, you probably couldn't stop the ball. Here, though, now we have about 2 years worth of foot traffic on this, and generally takes about 2 years for new greens to kind of settle in. So don't expect, even though these are new greens that we're going to see this week, don't expect, unless I'll have to look at what the weather's been, because it's been very dry in New York. I'll have to check if they've had similar drought conditions in Maryland as well. But if they've had, don't expect them to be firm just because they're new. They'll be firm if there hasn't been a lot of rain. So something to look for this week. You'll hear new greens may not be as firm as what we saw last week there. So that's part of the change that they did to this golf course, and some of the change here. I will follow up with the changing grass for the Tuesday show. I'm sure I will be able to hunt that down there. All right, so let's talk about what happened in 2021 as far as the difficulty of this golf course. And if you remember, you had the winning score at 27 under. I think 7 other guys finished 20 under or better. And pretty much it was defenseless that week. Almost every single category was bottom 5 in difficulty on the PGA Tour in 2021. As far as driving, approach play, putting, just not a lot of defenses for the place. It was hot. It was humid. It was muggy. Course played very soft. I'll show you some of the holes, what they looked like in 2021, just not a lot of defenses for it. And that reflected in the scoring. The average score that week is minus 2.8. Round 4, minus 3.5 scoring for a 7,500-yard golf course. That's a lot of birdies. And it just was a very, very easy, soft test that week. Specifically with driving. That is something that I'm sure Andy glossed on this week. The overall lack, no pun intended, of penalty at this place. Bottom across the board. Missed fairway penalty. Rough penalty. I said there was only 3-inch tall fescue rough there. That's not all that deep for ryegrass and fescue rough. Only 3 inches. Ball can kind of sit up pretty nice. You can still get good club head on, especially some of these bigger hitters who sprayed it everywhere and got away with it without much penalty. Non-rough penalty. That's basically your fairway bunkers. I'll show you a little bit. They're very big, and you wouldn't have a lot of lip issues if you found yourself in them. And there's just not a lot of natural hazards to incur a penalty if you spray it very, very offline. It takes a gigantic miss to probably incur a penalty if you hit it into the woods. And so it just pretty much was bombs away. The average driving distance, it was only about 290 on the week, but that could be attributed to there's some uphill holes and it was playing a little soft that week. There are a couple shorter par 4s as well that you probably would pull less than driver. Maybe that knocked down the driving distance a little bit, but it's very driver heavy. They're definitely, I'll show you some holes in a little bit, was an advantage to having length, to being able to carry certain bunkers off the tee. And even the driving accuracy rates, 65% on the week too. Just no adversity. And here's kind of what I'm talking about. This was the opening hole back in 2021. As you see here, there's an elevated tee box. You got a couple fairway bunkers, pretty far out. It takes about 312 to get to this first one, 325 to the one behind that over on the right, 328 to the middle over on the left. But again, though, just right out in front of you, your team from an elevated tee box, you have a big bomber. You probably can take some of these bunkers over on the right out of play. Relatively generous landing zone, even if you are in the rough, only 3-inch fescue rough. Just not a lot of adversity and nothing to really scare these guys off the tee back in 2021. Here's number 5. This is back up the hill. Again, just straight ahead. Relatively generous fairway here. This is one of the holes where length definitely could help you here, because it's about 295 to carry this far bunker over on the left, and then it kind of widens a little bit the farther you hit it. So if you were able to take this bunker out of play, hello, Bryson, that's why we all bet you that week. You definitely were at an advantage on this hole to carry all this stuff. Same thing with a couple of the bunkers over here, kind of narrowed in the driving zone. If you're carried everything, you took it out of play and actually rewarded you a little more with a little more room the landing zone here. And then same thing, number 6 here. Again, just where is the true adversity off the tee to really scare and intimidate these guys? Yeah, a big fairway bunker over on the right here, but again, just if you're right in the middle of it, yes, it's a longer approach out into the green, but you're not going to have a lot of lip issues here. You know, it's just not a lot of toughness and a lot of teeth to this. Again, a pretty relatively generous landing zone here. If you really we're going to incur penalty, you'd have to spray it really far right into the woods over here to really get you in trouble. These guys just aren't doing that here. So that's a big reason, just looking at how it was in 2021, why these guys were just not intimidated and scared of this place. They just wailed away with the driver, and it didn't really matter where it went, because even if you found the rough, there just wasn't a big penalty as we saw that week. So as far as proximity buckets go, this was relatively straightforward. It was a short iron fest. There definitely were some shorter par fours on the golf course where you would hit from under 100 yards, but it was mostly because the 7,500-yard golf course, a lot of shots from over 175. Higher percentage across the board from 175, 200, 200, 225, 250 plus. So wedges and long irons, nothing really between like 125 and 175, kind of what I would think more of like your classic like ball strikers would do pretty well. You know, like some of the short to the mid irons, like we saw like Southwind. Like this was a popular range to look for this week as far as your number of approach shots. Here it's short and long. So that was the proximity buckets. They did add a little bit of length that I'll show you to this golf course. I would not expect much change to this approach shot distribution chart this week. So you're basically focusing on under 125 performance. Like, don't go overboard with it. Even though it's higher than PGA Tour average, it's only accounting for roughly about 20% of your shots in a round. Mostly everything is going to be over 175. It accounts for 34, 40, like about 58% of your shots are coming from over 175. That's the biggest range you're going to look for this week as far as proximity buckets, stroke gain, stats. But as maybe we'll get to in a little bit, pros play, you don't necessarily have to hit your irons all that great to do really well here based on what the 2021 leaderboard shook out. Here's the comp courses. So I want to say this because there was, I think, a little bit of an argument that ensued about the comp courses on Data Golf and what this stuff suggests. All this suggests, and this is how I interpret it, is it just gives you a list of, it just compiles basically who's done well at the tournaments and what their skill sets are. That's just what is supposed to be predictive about it. And then it basically Data Golf spits out a list of courses that just have similar scatter plots to it. So, and sometimes it makes a lot of sense. Like I generally think a lot of the, with a couple exceptions, I think a lot of the courses on Southwind, their scatter plot chart makes sense. Or like when you look at Wyndham or like Memorial, like things like that. And when you get to kind of these golf courses without kind of rewards length and not a big missed fairway penalty, generally I see some of these courses that spits out over the left, I'll get to a little bit, and it makes sense. But it's your job at that point to look at the skill set chart and then look at the list and either say, is it just coincidental? Or maybe if there's something, and then it's up to you to pick and choose which ones you think make sense or not. And, there's a couple on this list you probably wouldn't think that would be a comp course, but it mostly might be just because of how it rewards certain driving attributes. For example, Oak Hill, which I think Andy would be disgusted the fact that this is on this list as a comp course, given how difficult it is, given how the architecture is better, ever being compared to Caves Valley. Oak Hill, though, was a golf course that had it had a lower missed fairway penalty because just the approach shots in general were very difficult at the golf course. And it rewarded you for just hitting it as far as you can. The farther you hit it, the better off you were, kind of like we saw at Caves Valley. So no surprise, it spit out a similar comp or skill set profile at that place as us here. Even though it's way harder golf course and a better golf course. That's why they appear on this list. Same thing with like a Wingfoot, similar situation there. Pinehurst, it rewarded length and there was not a very big missed fairway penalty. That's why this is on the list here. Again, better golf course, Pinehurst, than this place, but it was mostly because of the driving attributes. So that's why it's on here. And then you see places like Vedanta Vallarta. I think pretty much everybody would think that's a comp course this place. Just long, driver heavy, rewards length. Torrey Pines, I think that's actually a great comp because they're just kind of two boring vanilla golf courses. Rewards driver, long and straight. That's, on there too. Corrales, a fellow Fazio course. Valhalla, I think is going to be one that people look at this week. Just not a very exciting golf course, kind of thoughtless. I think that's going to be thrown around this week. I really have a lot of pushback. The Liberty National one, that's number one as far as a similar profile. I don't love that comp because there's way more water on that golf course. It might also just be too, there was only one tournament played, or well, I guess there's been a couple, so maybe it doesn't totally hold water, but it might just be small sample size why it's on there. Memorial Park, though, again, just not a big missed fairway penalty. Long, driver heavy, makes sense. Dunes Golf and Beach Club, you think of guys like Ryan Fox has won there. Chris Goddard's won there. I think Goddard would be somebody you're probably looking to bet this week, so no surprise that golf course shows up there. I think a lot of these courses, based on who did well there and how those skill sets kind of match this place, no big surprise, in my opinion. All right, let's talk about this gross leaderboard. I hate looking at this leaderboard for a lot of different reasons. One, like everybody that week, I was on Bryson. And this was off the heels of a hellacious month where I had to sit through, I had Bryson at Southwind, and he completely vomited all over himself on the back nine. I had Russell Henley at Wyndham, and he vomited all over himself at that tournament. Also at Kevin Na in the playoff, he blew it there too, so that was great. Double blowing it there. Had Cam Smith in Northern Trust, who got in a playoff. It ended on Monday, and he immediately hit it out of bounds on the first playoff hole. That was fun to lose to Tony Finau, who can't win. That was great. So, but I was feeling pretty good. We all hit the 35-1 Bryson number, all feeling great that week. And it looked like he was going to win. And then Cantlay hits a bomb putt, I think, on 18 to tie it. And then Cantlay just continued to hit putt after putt after putt. And this is where the moniker of Patty Ice came to play. And Bryson looked like he had Cantlay dead to rights a couple times in the playoff. Could never put him away. And then finally, Cantlay hit, I think, a 18-footer or so. On the sixth playoff hole, Bryson, I think, had 12 feet. Couldn't hit that. So that was all she wrote. And this just continued the painful summer 21 for outright betting for your boy here. So, but Cantlay wins at 27 under, beats Bryson. Sungjae finished third at 23 under. I want to save like some of the, maybe we'll talk a little bit about Sungjae and like some of the shorter hitters, like, because there's definitely going to be a type everyone wants to bet this week. And for the most part, it shows up in this leaderboard. Basically, your driver putters, guys who just hit it far, can gain a lot of strokes off the tee, and then can get hot with a putter. And that's really how most of the top 10 played out here. Like, obviously, you have Bryson, who gained 2 strokes off the tee that week. But even so, a lot of the driving leaders for the week ended up in the top 10, like Rory McIlroy, DJ, like Sergio, Sam Burns. Like, Sam Burns is a type that I think probably doesn't play very refined golf. Sorry if there's Sam Burns. I think we have one guy who is very sensitive when we criticize Sam Burns. Sam Burns is the typical kind of driver putter. I would think that drives are pretty good, drives it far. Sometimes it doesn't really matter where he hits it. Iron play has never really been his strong suit. He can get hot sometimes, but he's mostly, I wouldn't say one of the leaders, but he can get hot with a putter. Basically a Sam Burns type of golf course this week with Cays Valley. So no surprise, he's 8th. John Rahm is on the list too. So a lot of guys with a lot of length were very good drivers, did very well, can get hot with a putter. Accuracy pretty much did not matter on the weekend. You can kind of see with the within event correlations here, just off the tee in general, harder to separate yourself from the field, although Bryson did a very good job separating himself on the week. But distance, usually you don't see when distance makes up more of your strokes gained off the tee than accuracy on the week, at least in tournaments. And that was not the case. Distance far outweighed the need to hit fairways on the week. You can see in the skill set chart here. Iron play was about what you would expect as far as like importance in tournament as other PGA Tour stops, but you look at what the stats that people put up in the top 10. I mean, Cantlay gained like 1.2 strokes total with his irons. Bryson lost strokes with his irons. Rory lost strokes with his irons. DJ lost strokes with his irons. Noren lost strokes with his irons. Byrne didn't gain anything. So while it suggests that it's just as important as other tournaments, in tournament iron play, I mean, look at this top 10 here. Just didn't really matter all that much. There's a lot of volatility. I think a lot of it is Eric Van Rooyen and Sung Jae had massive weeks with their irons. That probably helps boost it a little bit. But overall, though, I mean, you can't tell me that the best ball strikers with their irons, like, they mattered on the week. It definitely didn't when you look at this leaderboard here. Around the green, definitely didn't matter at all. You have a lot of guys lose around the green, a couple guys gain, but definitely a mismatch across the board. You can see that with in-event correlations too. Way less important in tournament around the green performance than compared to your other golf courses. And then putting. This is where you see a giant skew over to the right. And you see all these guys that gained 1 billion strokes putting on the week, including Patrick Cantlay gained 3.6 strokes per round putting on the week. That's ridiculous. But also lost in that, Bryson gained 2.3 putting that week. He also had a molten hot putter on the week. And you see a bunch of guys have huge weeks. Sung Jae had a huge week putting. Rory has a huge week putting. DJ, Sergio even has huge week putting. John Rahm, like, giant weeks putting. And that was why this turned into essentially a putting contest on the week. You have a golf course that rewards length, and I'll grant you that, but just isn't a very stern ball striking test. And the best putters basically separated themselves in turn, which can be kind of a nightmare scenario for us handicappers, because putting is volatile and random, and it's hard to predict sometimes. But that turns out to be the most important in tournament stat that separates yourself, is putting on the week. Now, I mean, everybody's going to go for the driver putter narrative this week, and I grant you, like, a lot of guys like that show up in this leaderboard. And I'll show you the changes in a little bit, see if that maybe still holds water. But you did have some shorter hitters that still finished in the top 10. That's probably where your leverage is going to come from this week in DFS, because everybody's going to load up on bombers. We all remember that tournament very fondly. But you have your Sung Jaes, who didn't hit it very far, but he hit a lot of fairways and just had a great iron week and a great putting week. You got your, Norens and Abe Answers, two very short hitters, but again, we're heading for the fairway a lot. And because it's not the most complicated ball striker golf course, at least with their irons, they were able to just get in good position off the tee. Maybe avoid some of the rough because they are short. And there's a lot of long iron approach shots there. They are able to put themselves in good position to just hit a lot of putts on the week. So that could be an area where maybe for DFS, this is not a DFS show, but you could find some leverage and low ownership on some of those types of guys. So that's something to look at. But overall, though, like, everybody's going to say driver, putter, length, those types. Like, I have absolutely no pushback to any of that based on what the golf course is, how this leaderboard shook out. As we'll get to in a little bit, the changes that they made, which probably didn't really do much. But let's go over some of those changes that they made. So just to refresh, back in 2023, they heard player feedback of this place, and they decided to make some tweaks in order to toughen it up a little bit. And they wanted to basically do two things. One, they wanted to bring more hazards into play. And here's an example here. This was the second hole in 2021. So short par 4 around the lake here, from the tee box over to the left here. I mean, some guys I think did, because it's only about 295 to clear the water. Some guys did try and drive the green or just try and get into this front bunker right here. A lot of guys, though, just hit to the middle of the fairway here, had about 100 in for a very easy look too. And if you're hitting from, this tee box over on the right here, you're pretty much taking all the water out of play because you're just not even aiming at it. So water, unless you're going for the green, and with the length of these guys, they cleared it very easily. This water hazard just wasn't really in play all that much. So here's what they did here. So they took away this right tee box here. So now everybody's going to be teeing from the left tee boxes, which were always there, but I think now everybody's going to be teeing back over there. And now the water is actually in play because you got to hit a straight shot if you want to take it on. You're probably not. In fact, actually, you're not going to be able to drive the green anymore because they pushed it back a little bit. And there's these there's a couple of trees over here that basically blocks any attempts to drive the green over the lake here. So everybody's going to have to play it the same way now. It's going to have to be just put a lesson driver into the middle of the fairway here, hit a short iron in. It's going to make it kind of boring. But if you hit a bad shot, now the water is more in play. If it leaks a little bit more right, maybe some more penalty strokes for the guys who just are not as accurate with holding like a 3-wood or a 7-wood or whatever club they want to use the club down on this hole. But that's one of the changes that they made to try and bring the water hazard more into play for these guys is removing the bunker here, pushing the green back a little bit, and then forcing everybody to tee off over on the left here. So here's another example too. This is the long par 3/8. This is the cover photo that I showed you earlier with all the very nice foliage. Again, you're teeing off from a elevated tee box. 215 asked you to hit a nice, left to right fade as well. You do have water greenside, but again, it just isn't really in play all that much. Like there's a lot of room to bail out left here. Like unless you just hit a really foul ball for a lot of these guys, this water hazard wasn't really coming into play. Or if you got uber aggressive with like a back, like right pin, you could do that. But it just wasn't in play that much in that tournament. Here though, so they lengthened it. They also expanded the lake to now it's a bigger carry over the water to even like the front portion of the green. So that's how they changed this hole to bring water more into play and maybe penalize a worse shot, especially one that leads a little too far right. You're going to lose some distance if you flare it out a little right. It's probably going to find the water. You're probably going to see more penalty strokes and bigger scores on this hole than previously. So, and it's a longer approach shot now. Now it's 244 yards. Like that's fairly long, even though it is downhill. And you got a water hazard to contend with. So this could be a hole now that definitely can create some havoc, at least on the leaderboard, and guys just making doubles or triples or whatever to really shake things up. So as before, where, played downhill, water wasn't really in play. Now it's very much in play on this hole with the new configuration here. So, and two, they also redesigned some holes. A couple where they lengthened them. So this is the 10th here. This, I remember watching PGA Tour live, and this was the first hole we all saw because feature groups had everybody start on the back there, and just very nothing hole. Everybody took less than driver, put in the middle of the fairway here, had a flip wedge in, only 364 yards down the hill. Like you had a couple guys maybe hook it a little or push it a little too far right. They had some trouble, but overall though, everybody was making birdie. This is when I think we all figured out like, oh man, like they're going to eat this place up. The 10th hole, the old 10th hole was definitely a telltale sign of what was to come. Big change though. They lengthened it pretty significantly. They took out a lot more fairway bunkers. Now it's 477 yards. So a longer par 4, but and this, you have this bunker is about 325 out now. So this used to have previously they had 2 bunkers over on the right here. Now just a singular bunker over on the left. But again, though, like just not a difficult hole, tee to green, not a lot of adversity as far as hazards or having to shape the ball. You basically can just hit it just long and straight all the way down to set up a little bit longer approach shot downhill too. Like, yes, they added some length here, but it looks very similar to a lot of other holes that did not get altered at Case Valley that I kind of showed you earlier. Just so while this is definitely longer and will play harder on at least scoring wise, because you're turning it from a 364 yard thoughtless par 4 into a 477 yard thoughtless par 4. The scoring is going to be worse here, but it's not really changing the calculus of what you're looking for. Guys are still going to pull driver. There's still not a big penalty for missing fairways here. They just made the hole longer here. So, and then the 11th hole. So this tee box used to be over on the left. And it was, downhill, but 600 yards. So a pretty long par 5 here. I'm not sure now. It's shortened to 520 now. They didn't change the green though. It's still where it is. They just shortened the hole. They just pushed all this to the tee boxes over to the right. So it's a slightly different look and angle off the tee. You got to hit a nice left to right shot, maybe bring this bunker to play here. There's still a lot of room to kind of bail out right here. I don't know if this is like native fescue or anything to really get you in trouble, but I'm not sure if I would imagine they're probably going to make this just another long par 4. So until I get the GCS AA sheet to find out if this is now the 11th is now a par 4 instead of a par 5, we'll see. Obviously, whenever you change the par to try and make it more difficult, high PGA National, that's one way to do it. Instead of, a hole playing 4.4, instead of that being an under par hole, now that's suddenly magically over par, and everybody thinks it's more difficult and a better hole. That's another story. In any event, we'll find that out for the Tuesday show, but this was another change. The 11th is no longer 600-yard par 5. It potentially could be a 520-yard par 4. So we'll see. Stay tuned. But that's another change that they made here. And then here's 14 and 15 as well. So again, another shorter par 4. It's kind of it looks a lot like number 2, where a lot of guys would just play to the middle of the fairway and have like a 60-yard wedge into the green here. Green is surrounded by 4 front bunkers as well. You got some native fescue grasses over behind here. This is the old hole, by the way. And then 15, guys would tee off over on the right across the creek here to the green. That's how 14 and 15 were designed. Now they wanted to bring this creek behind that divided the 14 and 15. They want to bring that more into play. So they shifted the green back a little bit. Now it's the back edge is closer to this creek and native area here, to where if you do fly the ball over the green, you could potentially land in this area. It's a very narrow green as well, so definitely not a whole lot of room to navigate, but largely it's pretty much the same hole. Guys aren't probably going to be trying to drive the green here. They're probably going to have, take less than driver, hit to the fat part of the fairway here and have a little wedge in. There just is not a whole lot of room to operate between the front and the back, because you do have the creek looming on the right. And then number 15 here, they did push the green back a little bit, but now everybody's teeing off across the creek over on the right, or a little bit right here. So they basically have a different angle to this green. Still 187 yards, but you're not hitting over the creek and over this front bunker here. You're basically taking everything on straight on. So those are the significant changes to the golf course. I don't think it's going to change really what you're looking for. I think what embodies that is number 10. Is, yes, they lengthened it, but it looks like just every other par 4 at Caves Valley at that point. So that's not really going to change the calculus. Here, I guess if anything changed, putting some of the greens closer to some of the water hazards, it's probably going to lend itself to, you could definitely screw up a little bit if you're not sharp with your short irons on a couple of these holes, or not sharp with, especially on number 8, a long iron there. So I think it will add a little bit more difficulty. They did change a couple bunkers to kind of, I think, push them out a little farther into the driving zones as well on a couple of holes. But overall, though, fundamentally, this is pretty much the same golf course as we saw in 2021. I would not expect much change to what you looked for in that tournament to what you're looking for here, which pretty much is kind of night and day different than what you looked at Southwind. I think you definitely got to change gears a little bit as far as your profile of what you're looking for this week. So that's Caves Valley. Now let's look at the odds board a little bit. Oh man, why does this do this? I always have the odds up and then it just decides to disappear on me when I need it the most. So we have the spinning circle of death here as it thinks about giving me the odds. Come on, here we go. Okay, so this is first time me looking at the the odds board here. Scotty Scheffler plus 220. I mean, look, I think probably everyone was scared of Scotty this week at Southwind. You know, you go to a golf course with a high missed fairway penalty and rewards good ball striking and, you know, tip eagle greens. And, you know, we've seen Scotty win at those places over and over and over and over. And because he didn't win, you know, we're coming to a driver putter golf course, a golf course that, you know, probably I wouldn't say rewards the most skilled golf. It's kind of just TrackMan golf at this point. So maybe that might lull people into saying, well, I'm not really scared of Scotty this week. You know, I don't think this is really a golf course. May I remind everybody that we said the same thing about Scotty at Byron Nelson at TBC Craig Ranch, and he dog lapped the field. I would probably say that's a driver putter golf course. Same thing at Quail Hollow. I think people were like, yeah, it's kind of a dumbed down golf course, a little bit more driver putter that week. You know, we're kind of looking for your Brysons. I don't really love Scotty this week, and Scotty dominated the PGA. So I just want to say that word of caution before we potentially just write off Scotty this week and maybe get a false sense of, oh, well, he didn't win a Southwind. I don't think this is quite the course fit that we expect him. Maybe I'm not really looking to play him this week. May I remind you that he's won twice at these types of golf courses this year, including Quail Hollow, which is a Tom Fazio. So, you know, fading beware. Rory obviously would be a good fit for this week. Fresh off of taking this week off, not wanting to go to Memphis and raging the golf community by skipping this tournament and devaluing the FedEx Cup, despite all the embarrassment the FedEx Cup has delivered on itself for the last 2 decades, but that's another story. Obviously, Rory has done very well at Fazio courses. He's dominated Quail Hollow during his career. He won at Congaree. He did well at Kasumi Gaseki, won at the Summit Club. Just a lot of good, you know, it's a good comp, you know, he's a good course fit for what Fazio courses kind of asked from you. So plus 650, did well at Case Valley in 2021. Obviously, I think people are probably going to want to gravitate towards him this week, given his success at both here and other Fazios. Xander disappointed a lot of people this week. He's won at a couple Fazios. He's won at one. He won at Kasumi Gaseki. A lot of finishes at Quail Hollow. Maybe a flop lag spot for him this week. You know, we'll have to look at how the driver's performing, how the putter's heating up. Maybe we should be going back to Xander, especially because people just, you know, he just pointed a lot of people this week. Ludwig, you know, Ludwig had a pretty good Sunday. You know, we throw around comps like Torrey Pines. You know, he's won there. Driver's starting to heat up. We'll have to take a look at how the putter's been. But I'm going to guess Ludwig is probably going to be a very popular pick this week. Same thing with like probably a Hovland or Sam Burns. I can probably see myself betting Burns this week if he drifts. I mean, just what this golf course kind of rewards from people. I mean, if we're looking for driver putter, it's Sam Burns. So he's 35 to 1 on DraftKings right now. We'll see what some of the other pricing is, but if he drifts to like the 50-man field, like 40, 45, like, yeah, I could see myself putting Burns on the betting card. Like, it's pretty easy layup there. Same thing with a Hovland, even maybe a flop lag spot for him, but I don't know. He looks pretty bad this week, but not a lot of people are going to be on him. So maybe someone to consider. Cam Young probably will be someone to consider this week. Man hits ball far. Man hits a lot of putts. Cam Young. Chris Goddard, same thing. Probably a course we're looking to use him this week. What else? Yeah, I'm not really interested in Akshay. This is not a Shane Lowry course. Just kind of out on Bobby Mack at the moment. Matt McNeely, possibly. You know, I mean, he contended Torrey Pines. He's been playing all right lately. 60 to 1 on him. I could get myself around to that as just a guy who has plus length and can hit a lot of putts. I could see that. You know, a Harry Hall playing all right golf, looking to secure that last Ryder Cup spot. Looking to vindicate our loyal fan Dave as well. 71. I don't think he's going to win, but I said that about JJ Spawn last week. And he almost won. Kurt Kitayama, if he just continues to have good weeks with the putter. I mean, Twin Cities was a birdie fest. TBC Craig Ranch is a birdie fest. Maybe Kitayama can contend at those types of places. So that might be someone who might be kind of sneaky this week. Sam Stevens, even driver putter. If we're looking at that, 120-1. That's probably going to be someone I'm looking for. Ryan Fox, Thomas Dietrich, Johnny Vegas, who just did really well at Quail Hollow at the PGA and had a pretty good Sunday at St. Jude. Maybe carry him some momentum. That could be somebody might be interested in this week. Here's the thing, though. So, like, we throw around like a Vedanta comp and like, driver putter and all that stuff, or even like, John Deere's got a higher missed fairway penalty, but that'd be hilarious if Brian Campbell took this one down. When we're all like, every time it seems like we have talked about a golf course that just does not suit Brian Campbell's game, he has thrown it right back in our face. And 300-1 Brian Campbell this week at driver putter. Anything's possible, guys. So, all right, that is it. Like I said, this was going to be a short and sweet show. Thank you for watching. Thanks for listening. Boston Capper will be back on Tuesday for the betting show. We'll go over our cards this week. I had a pretty good week this week, despite not even really being close and outright. Positionals went very well. So goal, I think, for me is to be up. I'm trying to get to over 40 units won this year. I'm at, I think, about 37 right now. So I'd like to get over the hump by Eastlake. So we'll see what we can do. Hopefully it'll be a winner this week. Maybe even the books will be napping and they set ridiculously stupid round scores and we can take advantage of them by pounding unders on Thursday, but we'll see. But yeah, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the show. Hopefully it was informative, or at least a refresh of what you saw back in 2021 and kind of validating a little bit what you're thinking this week. We'll be back with Boston Capper on Tuesday. Thank you very much. We'll see you then.